Good evening and welcome to BATV News. I'm Andrew Laidley. Finance Minister Audley Shaw says he's making an effort to clarify how the funds to construct the Southern Coastal Highway will be allocated, as the original allocation did not make economic sense. Here's more.
There are a number of government infrastructure investment initiatives that have been implemented or are to be rolled out this year.
Among the projects to be rolled out is the Southern Coastal Highway. Minister Shaw says he will sign a loan agreement with the China Exim Bank next month to fund the project.
We have the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project from Eastern Kingston to Port Antonio, which I'm journeying to China next month. And it's expected that I should sign the loan agreement with the Exim Bank of China for the commencement of that project.
He says the government had to rescope the original allocation for the project as the initial proposition did not make economic sense.
When we took over, there was an amount of some $400 million earmarked to build a highway, a toll road from Harbor View to Morant Bay. $400 million US. And it doesn't include land acquisition. That would have reached about $500 million. And we really thought about it, looked at it. There was no conceivable basis that such a project would make any economic sense whatsoever.
He says the new allocation provides for more work to be done with less money.
It is not a statement of disrespect to the people of St. Thomas. It is an issue of fiscal responsibility. And so what we did was to rescope the project. And we decided to build a highway similar to the North Coast Highway. We decided to build a South Coast Highway, Southeast Coast Highway, which would go from Harbor View to Morant Bay onwards to Port Antonio, and even do a section from Morant Bay into Cedar Valley, which is into the heartlands of St. Thomas.
The finance minister says the $400 million which was once allocated to the Southern Coastal Highway alone will now be divided equally to build 2 new highways.
That project has been rescoped to $200 million. The other $200 million will be used to expand the East-West Highway from Maypen to Williamsfield.
For BATV News, I'm Andrew Laidley. In the meantime, Dr. Fenton Ferguson, Member of Parliament for St. Thomas Eastern, says he is shocked by media reports which gave the impression that an environmental impact assessment study is only being done on the section of the Southern Coastal Highway from Harbourview to Albion in western St. Thomas. As a result, Dr. Ferguson is asking the Prime Minister for clarity as it relates to the section from Albion to Port Antonio. The Member of Parliament says any attempt to shortchange the people of St. Thomas Eastern and Portland East will not be tolerated. He adds that the people of St. Thomas and Portland East are urgently awaiting the response of the appropriate authority. Chairman of the Tourism Linkages Council and member of the Economic Growth Council, Adam Stewart, says agriculture is the first to experience the positive ripple effect of growth in the economy. He was responding to a question at the EGC's first quarter report briefing at the Jamaica Pegasus recently. Anthony Morgan reports.
The Sandal CEO says while the EGC is the foundation for getting the work started, other bodies like the Linkages Council are responsible for identifying challenges in the sector.
There are amazing gaps that exist in Jamaica. We have some of the most arable land anywhere in the world. Despite the water challenges of NWC getting water to certain parts of the country, we have rivers that spit water into the ocean by the billions of gallons every single day. And yet we import 20 million pounds of Irish potato in the country, one of the most stable crops in the country that can be financed, that can be stabilized and warehoused. We are importing it instead of growing it ourselves.
Mr. Stewart says the growth of the agriculture industry by some 20% is attributable to other sectors.
Tourism is up and booming, arrivals are up, and the economy is growing in excess of 1.5%, so 1.7% last quarter, and the quarter before at 2.3%. There is more money moving around society and discretionary income for people to buy.
Meanwhile, the Tourism Linkages Council chair says the hardest thing in business is to find a cash flow.
We have 32,000 rooms in Jamaica that every day are buying berries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries for our customers to put on our. We have arable land for berries above a certain altitude in this country, but we have not connected an entrepreneur with a cash flow. The cash flow is here. It's being spent every single day in Jamaica.
But he points out that about $1 billion taken from the Exim Bank and the Tourism Enhancement Fund, TEF, was placed in the economy and is being used by entrepreneurs.
Within 30 days, 90% of the $1 billion was already accounted for by new entrepreneurs. So we need another billion, and another billion, and another billion. So we're connecting those dots. We set up the Tourism Purchasing Council Association, which is following all the principles of the EGC, and we're putting the most powerful members of the hotel groups to work to discuss what are the gaps, where are the farmers, and how do we connect those. We're building technology, live technology.
For BATV News, I'm Anthony Morgan.
Minister of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries Carl Samuda says the government will be offering increased support to stakeholders in the cocoa industry. He says the ministry, through the extension services of the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, RADA, will be designating teams to work directly with the farmers in the cocoa industry. Minister Samuda says the extension officers will also provide technical guidance to farmers on reaping practices, as well as in detecting and reacting to any introduction of diseases within fields. In addition to technical advice, farmers will be provided with seedlings and other productivity incentives to encourage an expansion of cocoa production to more parishes across the island. Meanwhile, Mr. Samuda says legislation to establish the Jamaica Agricultural Commodities Regulatory Authority, JACRA, which was passed in the House of Representatives in September last year, will allow cocoa farmers to determine their prices and enable higher levels of competition within the industry. The minister was addressing the opening ceremony for a two-day international fine cocoa conference and chocolate expo at the Spanish Court Hotel yesterday. And still to come, crime costing the economy billions. We'll tell you what a recent IDB report says. That's after the break. Welcome back. A study by the Inter-American Development Bank says crime has cost Jamaica some $60 billion between 2010 and 2014. The study, which was released a few days ago, estimates that the direct annual cost of crime and violence in Latin America and the Caribbean was $261 billion. More in this report. The IDB points out that the cost of crime in the region is equivalent to the income of 30% of the poorest population, underscoring the grave development impact violence has on the region. The report, which is being called The Costs of Crime and Violence, New Evidence, New Revelations in Latin America and the Caribbean, is a landmark effort to provide comparable crime costs numbers for 17 countries in the region, benchmarking them against 6 developed countries. According to the report, crime and violence are at near crisis levels in Latin America and the Caribbean. The region accounts for 9% of the world's population, but contributes nearly 1/3 of its homicide victims, making it the most violent region outside of war zones. 6 out of 10 robberies in the region involve violence, and 90% of murders go unresolved. Its prisons are the most overcrowded in the world. The report shows that Jamaica's crime cost is 3.99%. That's the 4th highest in the region. It also revealed that the average cost for incarceration from 2010 to 2014 was 0.44% of the country's GDP. That's over $60 billion. Manager of the IDB's Institutions for Development Department, Ana Maria Rodriguez, echoes similar sentiments. Violence at the regional, sub-regional, and national levels. The study will help governments and international cooperation agencies better allocate resources, as well as design better policies to control and prevent crime. Crime-related costs are an 5% of GDP in Latin America, compared to 2.7% in the US, 2.55% in the UK, and 1.34% in Germany. If the region brings its crime costs down to the level of developed nations, it could increase its infrastructure investment. The study breaks down the costs of crime into three parts. The social costs include lethal and non-lethal victimization and prison populations, 0.64% of GDP. Private spending on security by business and households, 1.37% of GDP. Public spending, including the cost to the justice system, spending on police services, and spending on prisons, 1.51% of the GDP. The IDB says the estimates are conservative as they include mainly direct costs of crime, public and private spending on security, and the social costs. They do not include indirect costs such as changes in behavior due to fear of crime or the impacts of crime on the health of persons. Assistant Commissioner of Police ACP Clifford Chambers says business owners should work with the security forces to safeguard their operations from criminal victimization. He says a recent study shows that 65% of 400 firms sampled reported that they had experienced one or more forms of criminal victimization. The ACP says some negative impacts of crime on small businesses are loss of output caused from reduced hours of operation or work days, avoidance of some economic activities, or the shutdown or relocation of businesses due to crime. ACP Chambers says he is encouraging members of the business community to develop relationships with law enforcement agencies in a shared commitment to fight crime. He's also urging business operators to practice additional measures to protect their enterprises, including early closure of businesses, hiring unarmed or armed security guards, installing electronic alarms and internal security systems, as well as closed-circuit television (CCTV) with good megapixel quality inside and outside the premises. ACP Chambers says employers should also properly vet employees and engage staff members in the security process. He's also advising business owners to establish security networks among themselves. To prevent fraud, the Assistant Commissioner was speaking at the Small Business Association of Jamaica Biz Social recently. Another businessman has found himself in trouble with the law for failure to produce books, records, and documents. The Tax Administration Jamaica TAJ, through the Intelligence, Investigation and Enforcement Unit, recently prosecuted St. Andrew businessman Ainsley Lowe, director of Image One Company. Mr. Lowe was prosecuted under Section 17 of the Amended Revenue Administration Act for failure to produce books, records, and documents as requested. The businessman was found guilty in the Sutton Street Tax Court on January 11 and fined $200,000 or 10 days imprisonment. The TAJ says it's reminding business persons that not keeping proper books and records relating to their business activities is an offense. The TAJ adds that failure to produce such books, records, and documents within the time specified when requested by the Commissioner General, Tax Administration Jamaica, for an audit or investigation is a criminal offense. The TAJ says this will result in prosecution which carries a penalty of up to $2 million or imprisonment or both. And stay with us. Regional and international stories are next. Welcome back. It's time now for regional and international news. Haiti's new Prime Minister says he will modernize agriculture and to tackle climate change and corruption, but allegations of fraud already hangs over him. Al Jazeera's Mariana Sanchez reports from Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince.
Camp 42 is home to thousands of Jarel Nicolas has lived in this tiny hut with 6 other people for 7 years. Like most here, he lost family members and his home. He's still waiting for government aid before he can rebuild.
They abandoned us here. There are no jobs, no food, and we can't send our kids to school. There is no good future here at the camp.
His is one of more than 50,000 families UNICEF says are still living in shelters. The burden on the new government is high. The UN World Food Programme says 2.5 million Haitians live in extreme poverty. Last year, Hurricane Matthew brought more devastation to what is one of the poorest nations in the world. For decades, Haiti has been traumatized by natural disasters, economic hurdles and political instability. The challenges for Jovenel Moïse are immense, while also facing questions about his integrity. The government's Central Unit of Financial Intelligence says $5 million through suspicious money transfers. Allegations he denies.
The new president must not continue like his predecessors. So far, his team is full of familiar faces, people who were involved in corruption. Haiti's biggest challenge is the fight against corruption and impunity. But it's early. We're going to give him a chance to prove otherwise.
At Camp 42, where most people live on less than $3 per day, community leader Decilian Cimedieu says he also wants to give Moïse a chance to bring dignity to poor Haitians. More than 6 million live below the poverty line.
We have to wait and see what is going to happen. Previous governments came and made promises, but nothing happened. The only thing we can do is wait.
Gerald Nicolas needs to work to provide for his children. Moïse says he will create jobs. The people living in Camp 42 will be relying on him to make good. Mariana Sanchez, Al Jazeera, Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Weaker output in manufacturing and construction drove the biggest monthly drop in German industrial production in nearly 8 years. In December, dashing prospects for robust growth in the final quarter of 2016. David Pollard reports.
It's a surprise tumble, but economists say, don't be surprised. The biggest fall in nearly 8 years in German factory output blamed on special factors like cold weather and the impact of Christmas on the December reading.
If you flip that across and look at actually factory orders came in much better than expected.
Compared to output, factory orders did rise 10 times more than expected, a sign of a strong start to 2017, if there are big worries about how it might end. With Donald Trump's protectionist rhetoric edging onto the European stage, German unions, government and trade bodies now getting together to voice their concern.
Steht für uns viel auf dem Spiel.
There's a lot at stake. Hundreds of thousands of German jobs depend on European companies selling products in the United States and US companies investing in Europe.
For Britain, the concern is inflation spiking on a weaker pound. The latest retail sales survey showing consumers reining in spending last month, though not all see a Brexit doomsday scenario yet.
The IMF predicted it, the Bank of England predicted it, and a whole host of economists predicted it. It hasn't happened yet.
But December retail sales already fell at their most in more than 4 years, and last week the Bank of England reported a slowdown in consumer borrowing. It may not have happened yet, but as other economists say, it could still happen.
More than 80 representatives from banks and businesses have been meeting with authorities from Paris who are highlighting the attraction of the French capital if Britain's exit from the EU forces the relocation of some activities in continental Europe. Here's more.
47 best over 510. Forget fine wine and good food. The big question from London's bankers was, how much tax will I pay? More than 80 representatives from UK banks have met with authorities from Paris who are trying to woo British financiers in the wake of the Brexit vote. Britain's departure from the EU widely expected to force the relocation of some jobs.
Paris is saying it doesn't want to steal jobs from London. It wants to be an alternative global capital, a so-called win-win situation. It says it already has the infrastructure, the global talent pool, the global education. But of course it's competing with other European capitals such as Frankfurt. But the big joke amongst the French is to ask, when have you ever booked a weekend in Frankfurt in the past few years?
France thinks it can attract 10,000 jobs, although bankers mention French tax rates and labour laws as a possible deterrent. The French government introduced tax concessions for expats last year in the hope Paris could profit from Brexit. But experts say other centres with more flexible labour and tax rules could be bigger beneficiaries. Banks also keeping a close eye on French politics.
Banks are waiting to decide whether they move to Paris for the outcome of the French elections, which are due in April-May. But we have had one solid commitment from HSBC. It has said that it could move 1,000 jobs to Paris.
Dublin and Luxembourg among rivals to Paris. Not to be outdone, senior German regulators met with 50 envoys from foreign banks last week to try to attract them to Frankfurt. But the French delegation thinks lifestyle questions give it the upper hand.
Mining is big business in Africa, but few people benefit from the riches it produces at the continent's largest mining conference in Cape Town. The focus is on rebuilding confidence after a few tough years due to falling commodity prices. But there are also questions about ownership and control of the mines and the wealth they generate. Al Jazeera's Tanya Page reports from South Africa.
The machinery at Blyford gold mine fell silent 4 years ago. Around 1,700 people lost their jobs. They say they feel abandoned by their employer and the South African government, which is refusing to help.
Who's going to come out and say I'm responsible? Nobody's going to say I'm responsible. So basically what I'm saying to you is the community is by itself. They are in the no man's land.
When the mining company Village Main Reef moved out, the criminals moved in, vandalising the buildings and stealing cables to sell the metal. Former employees patrol the abandoned mine, hoping a new owner will give them a job. So far, theirs are the only footsteps to be heard here. Some find it hard to believe government promises that their interests are a priority at the biggest mining conference on the continent.
As we move mining forward, let us take everyone along and ensure that indeed the mineral wealth beneath our soil benefit all South Africans.
The government has also angered the mining industry by suggesting 26% of mines should be permanently owned by black people as a way to share resource wealth. Black ownership has its own critics among community groups who say it will only be good for a small number of wealthy black people. The issue of how to ensure black communities benefit from mining is central to this conference. But the problem for struggling communities like the one in Blyford is that smartly dressed delegates talking about the issues doesn't change their reality, in which they continue to feel forgotten. The government proposal of 26% black ownership is being challenged in the courts.
Well, it's very easy to point fingers at the industry for not having done enough, but we can equally point fingers at local government, at national government, at communities themselves for not having done enough in terms of the partnerships that are required to get the outcomes that we need.
Back in Blyford, former miners try their hand at sewing to make ends meet. And they're moving thousands of employment records to a safer place, hoping that soon someone takes as much care of their future as they're doing of their past. Tanya Page, Al Jazeera, South Africa.
Talking Stocks is after the break. Welcome back. It's time now for Talking Stocks. 51 stocks traded today, of which 33 advanced, 8 declined, and 10 traded firm. The main JSE index advanced by 5,336 points to close at 241,473 points. The junior index also advanced by 48 points to close at 3,029 points. Over 9 million units traded, valued at more than $127 million on the Jamaican dollar market. Cable and wireless with over 3 million units changing hands accounted for 39% of the market volume. Blue Power Group was second with over 894,000 units trading. CAC 2000 accounted for over 869,000 units, amounting to 9% of the market volume crossing the floor. Jamaica Stock Exchange ordinary shares was the top advancer, up 99 cents to close at $7.20, followed by Salada Foods up $1.25 to close at $9.25, and Lasco Financial up 50 cents to close at $4. The main decliners were Caribbean Cement Company down $1.37 to close at $32.85, followed by Derrimont Trading Company losing 5 cents to close at $2, and Pulse Investments down 13 cents to close at $7.09. And that's all the news we have for this evening, but before we go, a recap of our top story. Audley Shaw says government had to change the way how the funds to construct the Southern Coastal Highway was allocated because the original allocation did not make sense. Thanks for watching. For more content, visit our website at batvja.com. I'm Andrew Laidley. Pleasant viewing.